On today's episode, we're talking about all the Week 6 matchups, plus all of my starts and sits for Week 6, plus LeVeon Bell now is a Kansas City Chief. What does that mean for Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Coming right up. And what's up, everyone? You're listening to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast for Friday, October 15, 2020. And I am Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So, please support the show, hit subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about all the Week 6 matchups, all my starts and sits for Week 6. But before, let's go into all the news that took place on yesterday, because yesterday was a big day for the Kansas City Chiefs and what it means for Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners. So LeVeon Bell got released from the New York Jets, and he had his option to sign with any team he wanted. The options were the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Chiefs. He decided to sign with the Chiefs, which I think obviously is great news for the Chiefs organization for getting another playmaker on their roster. But unfortunately, this really caps what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to bring you when it comes to fantasy. Now, a lot of people were excited about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know I was, but then, the draft stock that you had drafted him was pretty high. You probably drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire as your number one running back, and it looks like you're not going to get that production out of him now because of LeVeon Bell. I think that when it comes to what LeVeon Bell brings, he brings a different dynamic. He is still a pass-catching running back. He does have the ability to run between the tackles. So I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire still does get his touches. He still leads the Chiefs' backfield in touches. It just obviously caps out what his upside is going to be, because Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a huge ceiling to give you great games. We haven't seen it since the first game of the season, but now with LeVeon Bell on the roster, it really limits it. And now you have to look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a RB2 for the rest of the season. Now, LeVeon Bell still cannot obviously be with the team because based on COVID protocol, the NFL you have to have 6 days of negative testing in order to go to the team. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire has one more game this week against the Bills where he's going to be the workhorse. And then he'll have week 7 as well. But by that time, looking at some of the tweets that I saw from Adam Schefter, he said that the earliest that LeVeon Bell can practice is Wednesday of next week. So I don't know how that's going to play out when it comes to how ready he will be to be available for the Chiefs. But it looks like at least have one more game with Clyde Edwards-Helaire as possibly an RB1 this week. But it's just unfortunate because everyone was really excited about him, especially in fantasy. He goes to the best offense in football. He goes to obviously the best situation for any running back that was a rookie. But now with LeVeon Bell, it's going to be fun to watch from an NFL fan standpoint. But if you're a Clyde Edwards-Helaire owner, it really hits your team hard because now you have to figure out how do I get an RB1 on my team. So I would try to trade him if you can. If there's something that you can do to try to get an RB1, package him up with somebody else. But unless your team's strong enough where you can, sustain having what it's like to be, having like a guy in the timeshare like that. I mean, it's not saying that it's not doable. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire still has value, but I do think that are we going to see maybe an Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram situation like we did a few years ago when Alvin Kamara became a rookie and he was on the Saints and he was trying to kind of fill out his spot on the roster. And, at the time they had Adrian Peterson, they had Mark Ingram, then obviously they drafted Alvin Kamara. And then Alvin Kamara ended up being a fantasy star. And both Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara were both fantasy stars. So I do think that there's potential of that still being the case. But I don't know. Mark Ingram's a different running back than obviously LeVeon Bell. So, Mark Ingram's more of that power back. Alvin Kamara is more of that finesse back. And, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he has struggled on the goal line. He has so far 7 rushing attempts at the goal line and 0 touchdowns. So it's been one of those things where do they have to come and find somebody who can a little bit bigger of a back to take those goal line carries. And I think LeVeon Bell kind of fits that bill. So It's unfortunate. It's fun watching the Chiefs. It was fun watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I was really, really excited to kind of see what his upside is and him take over games. But he now has to be more efficient. Now he has to be, once he gets the ball, he has to do a lot with that. And I think that, like I said, he still has some obviously value in fantasy, but it's going to be more of an RB2 situation. But, overall, from a football standpoint, I mean, I don't know what the defense are going to do against the Chiefs. I mean, they have to deal with Hill, Kelsey. They got to deal with Hardman, and Watkins when he's healthy. Now you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, now LeVeon Bell. Like, it's going to be hard to defend that team. But overall, if you're a football fan, it's a cool signing just because it's going to be fun to watch. But from a fantasy standpoint, it's a little discouraging. Now moving on to some injury stuff. So Devontae Adams, he's been out for a few weeks. He practiced in full so far this week, so he's good to go on Sunday. So if you have him, put him in your lineup. And then Deontay Johnson. So we saw Chase Claypool break out on Sunday. He had 3 touchdowns receiving and a rushing touchdown, and it's not all because of Deontay Johnson went out, but a lot of it was because Deontay Johnson was hurt. So obviously gave Chase Claypool more of a upside for that game. So then he returned to practice on Thursday. So it was limited, but this was when I did the waiver wire show that with Chase Claypool, he was the top free agent ad for this week. But if Deontay Johnson is going to play, I think that obviously caps his upside. So I think that's an important piece of news because if you do have Chase Claypool, it'll be cool to try to play him. But you have to understand too, like there's going to be some upside limitations if Deontay Johnson is available on Sunday. So pay attention. I think obviously Claypool is a good play. He plays Cleveland this week, but like I said, it limits his upside when it comes to Deontay Johnson on how he's going to practice this week and if he's going to be a active player this week. And then just breaking news this morning, the Colts facility has been closed. In the organization they had some positive cases come back this morning. So as a precautionary measure, they decided to close their facility. The games should still be on. As the Colts play the Bengals this week. So this is another week where we got to deal with, is the game going to be postponed, canceled, rescheduled? So you just got to be careful on your roster and just continue to have a contingency plan just in case. And the same thing with the Falcons. The Falcons, they had some outbreak go on in their facility. They closed their facility for precautionary measures as well. As of this morning, there hasn't been any news that took place that indicated that the game was not going to be played. So it looks like that game is still on, but still continue to look at the news just in case you have to pivot. And then just some quick fancy ads for this week because, obviously waivers in most leagues ran overnight Wednesday to Thursday morning. And just like expected, the most fancy ads that we had this week was Chase Claypool was the number one guy. Justin Herbert was added in a lot of leagues. Justin Jackson, when he was available out there, he was available. And then Alexander Madison, he was added. He wasn't added as in many leagues. He wasn't the top guy because Alexander Madison was owned in a lot of leagues. So with that being the case, he was not the top guy added just because he was already owned in a lot of leagues. And then you got Mike Williams. He was available. I mean, he had a great game on Monday night. We don't know the stats of Keenan Allen, but the Chargers do have a bye week. So Mike Williams, I don't know how his upside is going to be. But he was another ad that was there as well. And then the most fancy drops this week was AJ Green was the number one guy. He hasn't really been doing anything. He's been playing injured. Sounds like he has a hamstring issue that he's dealing with. Looks like he is going to try to play through it. But AJ Green right now is just one of those guys that just not going to. I mean, it's been 5 weeks, and he could have potential close or good games because of some of the touchdowns that were missed between him and Burrow. But I think that AJ Green is just going to be a guy that maybe a bye week fill-in and hope that he does something when you play him. But he shouldn't be rostered right now just because you can't trust him. And then Dearness Johnson was dropped. He was one of the main drops this week as well. I think a lot of people wasn't sure how the Browns were going to use him. I mean, obviously he definitely brings value because if Kareem Hunt goes down, Dearness Johnson is the only guy that's going to be there, to back him up that has the potential to do anything in fantasy. So I think if he's available, if you have the bench space, I would add him, even though he was dropped. And then Russell Gage, Russell Gage had a couple good games early in the season. People picked him up, played him, had nothing. You got nothing out of him. So Russell Gage was dropped. And then you got Leonard Fournette. He was dropped. Leonard Fournette. He was a guy that obviously was hurt. So a lot of this list here is a lot of injured players. I mean, this is what happens when you have all these guys that you want to pick up in free agency during the waiver wire period. You have to drop dead weight. So these are some of the names that I'm not shocked with any of these names that were dropped. But with that being the case, let's go on into the week 6 matchups and all my starts and sits. And the first game we're going to start off with is the Texans versus the Titans. You know, the Tennessee Titans are favored in this game by 3.5 points. The over/under is 52.5. Now, obviously at quarterback, you're going to start Deshaun Watson. You're going to start Ryan Tannehill. At running back, you're going to start Derrick Henry, David Johnson, and I think David Johnson's more of an RB2 this week, but he's a startable player. And that wide receiver, really the only wide receiver playing for the Titans is AJ Brown. I don't think Corey Davis is cleared to play yet, and same with Adam Humphries. I know they were taken off the COVID list, if I saw that correct, but I don't think they're clear to play yet. So AJ Brown will continue to get all the targets, which you saw we did on Monday night. Had a good game coming back, so he had about 21 points if you play in a PPR league. So he's definitely a must play this week. Same thing with Will Fuller. Will Fuller, you know, in the beginning of the year, we weren't sure exactly how that was going to play out because he just wasn't. It was very hit and miss. Seems like he's been consistent the last few weeks, so I think Will Fuller is a safe play. And then my boom bust candidate. So we all know that a lot of people drop Brandon Cooks the week prior, and then he comes out and has a 30-point game. I think you got to be very careful with Brandon Cooks only because he's definitely a talented player. However, you have to make sure that you're not chasing the points and trying to put him in your lineup because this is not the best match. The Titans have a very good defense. So with that being the case, Brandon Cooks, just be aware that you could have another 0-point game for Brandon Cooks. It's not likely, but I don't think you're going to have a 30-point game either. So Brandon Cooks, if you have him, if you need to play him, I understand that, but he's more of that boom bust player for this week. And then at tight end, the only tight end you're going to play right now is Jonnu Smith for the Tennessee Titans. He continues to have a great season. Had a great Monday night game, so I think Smith is a tight end that you want to play in this game. Then moving on to the Bengals versus the Colts. Like I said earlier in the podcast, this game continuously has to be monitored because we have no idea how the COVID tests are going to come back, if they're going to be positive, if they have to shut down the facility for a longer period of time, if this game's even going to be played. But as of right now, I think that they're not having knee-jerk reactions. They're going to kind of let things play out because I don't think any player. I think it was all in the front office. I don't think it was any player. But that's all the news I have as of right now. But right now in this game, you know, the Bengals are favored, or the Colts are favored in this game. The over/under is 46.5, and you know the Bengals right now. From a quarterback standpoint, you're not playing any quarterback. You're not playing Joe Burrow, and you're not playing Phillip Rivers. You know, Joe Burrow struggled against the Ravens that were a very good defense. And then now he plays the Colts, who have the number 2 pass defense. So I'm concerned about Joe Burrow this week in the sense of his fantasy upside. So if you have him on your roster, you have a better option, like a streaming option, then go with that. But I'm going to sit Joe Burrow and Phillip Rivers. And then at running back, you're obviously going to play Joe Mixon and Jonathan Taylor. I understand Joe Mixon, he had that huge game a couple weeks ago. He had an average game last week, but he's on your roster. You have to play him. I mean, he's a guy that could have those breakout games, and he's probably your RB1, and you have to continue to play him. Same with Jonathan Taylor. You know, this Colts offense has really been hindered by Phillip Rivers' play, in my opinion, and I think that with Jonathan Taylor, he continues to have value because he can get those touchdowns, because he can break out a 75-yard touchdown run, you know, but is one of those things where he does. I think that offense is just limited based on Phillip Rivers and them getting to the red zone and goal line attempts and all that stuff. But I think Jonathan Taylor still is a playable, you know, player in this game. And then at the flex, you're going to play Nyheim Hines. I think that he still has flex appeal. Probably doesn't have the biggest upside, but I think that, you know, if you're struggling to find somebody to play in the flex, I think Hines is a good option. At wide receiver, you're going to play Tyler Boyd. You know, I think Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are more of a flex play this week. Same with T.Y. Hilton. Like I said, upside's a little capped with the quarterback play. So with that being the case, I think they're decent flex options. And then for a boom bust candidate, you know, obviously T.Y. Hilton has been struggling with the Colts, but I think Zach Pascal, because he's the second option as a wide receiver on that team, I think he has some appeal. Not a guy that I would play, but you know, if you're in deeper leagues, in a 16-team league, and you have deeper rosters, you may have to play him. And then at tight end, you're going to sit Drew Sample. And you're not going to play any tight end for the Colts this week. I just think that right now we saw what happened with Mo Cox last week. He had a couple games he did well, then threw up a goose egg last week. Trey Burton, obviously he's not a startable player right now, and Jack Doyle. It's just not a tight end play that I want to have in this game. So it's just one of those things. Very very little fantasy players that are going to be started in this game, but there is at least Joe Mixon and Jonathan Taylor. And then moving on to the Falcons versus the Vikings. Like I said, Minnesota Vikings are favored by 4 points. The over-under is 54. Like I said, this is another game that could potentially have some complications with the COVID stuff. So as of right now, there's no indication that the game's going to be canceled. So with that being the case, I think that when it comes to who you're going to play at the quarterback position in this game, I think Kirk Cousins is a streamer this week. Obviously the Falcons are awful on defense. The Falcons give up good fantasy. Teddy Bridgewater just had a 25-point PPR game last week. I think Kirk Cousins, with the weapons that he has, I think he has a decent game where you can stream him just in case you have a player like Joe Burrow or somebody that you have to bench because of the matchup, or if something happens with the COVID and there's a postponed game or whatnot. But Kirk Cousins is a streamer this week. And then you're sitting Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, it's hard to sit something like this because at any moment he could have a huge game. But I don't think Julio Jones is playing this week. I think he's going to be out one more week. It's crazy to see how much Julio Jones means to this offense in the sense of they have all this talent. They have Calvin Ridley, right? They have Hayden Hurst. They have Todd Gurley. They have Russell Gage. They have pieces there. But it's crazy to realize how much Julio Jones means to this roster based on how that offense runs. And right now, like as I mentioned in the podcast earlier in the week, that Matt Ryan has not thrown a touchdown pass in 11 quarters. His last touchdown pass came against the Chicago Bears in the first quarter to Hayden Hurst. So ever since then, he has thrown a touchdown. So I rather sit Matt Ryan just to see what he does. If the new coaching, like Raheem Morris is now the new coach for the Falcons. How's the offense and him and Dirk Cutter? How do they connect in the sense of how they want to run the offense? Do they go back to the basics and just go more run heavy? Because if that's the case, I think Todd Gurley is a fine start this week. He's more of an RB2 for me with the upside because he can, like I said, he put together his best game last week when he had, the rushing yards and the 2 touchdowns. So he definitely had a good game. Does that continue this week against the Vikings? And obviously you're going to play at running back Alexander Mattison. So Dalvin Cook is not going to play this week. They're not going to chance his groin injury. They're worsen when they have a bye week next week. So I think Alexander Mattison is a huge, he has a huge game this week. I think he's definitely something that you could start with confidence. And that wide receiver, you're going to play Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. They should have both of them should have big games this week because we saw what happened last week with the Panthers. DJ Moore has been struggling. He got a touchdown last week. Robbie Anderson continues to be one of the better players on the Panthers at the wide receiver position. He had a good game. So I can see Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson both having good fantasy games this week. And then on the Falcons, you're going to play Calvin Ridley. And then, like I said, you're going to sit Julio Jones because he could be hurt. And do you want to risk it? I mean, I understand he's your best wide receiver on your team, more than likely. So if he's active, you want to play him. But you may only get a quarter or half from him if he re-aggravates his hamstring. And I think Russell Gage is a boom bust based on the potential of what happens with Julio Jones. So I know he's been dropped in a lot of leagues. I know he's been disappointing, but he's a guy that he's one of those high risk, high reward players. And then at tight end, you're only going to play Hayden Hurst in this game. Hayden Hurst continues to struggle. Right, he hasn't had a good game since he played Dallas. He's only had like 10 yards receiving in the last 2 games. So Hayden Hurst is a guy that he still gets 6 targets, so he's still involved. It's a matter of how efficient those targets are. But I think you still have to play Hayden Hurst for now because at the tight end position, it's awful. So like you want to try if you can get an Eric Ebron or someone else like that, then that's one thing to pivot to. But right now, I mean, if you don't have some of the top guys at tight end, you're just trying to, you're playing Russian roulette with who you have at tight end. And then going on to the Broncos versus the Patriots. This game got postponed. It got pushed back to this week. So a good thing for the Patriots because they get Stephon Gilmore back on defense and then Cam Newton comes back. But the Patriots are favored in this game by 9.5 points. The over-under is 45. At quarterback, you're going to start Cam Newton. You're not playing Drew Lock against this Patriots defense because he's supposed to come back from injury. So he's a player that you're not going to play. And then a wide receiver, you're going to play Julian Edelman. I think he's really the only player you can actually start in this game. If Cam Newton is obviously playing, which it looks like he will be, then Julian Edelman, it becomes a decent play because it looks like him and Cam Newton have a connection. So I think he has a better game this week. And at the flex, pick and choose what Patriots running back you want to play, because obviously I think Damian Harris gets the bulk of the carries. Then you got James White and Rex Burkhead, who obviously are PPR options that are more receiving running backs, so they do have some flex appeal there. I think Jerry Jeudy, I know he potentially could be a good flex option only because he's the number 1 wide receiver for the Broncos. However, we know that the Patriots can shut down their best offensive asset, and I think that's the case with Jerry Jeudy. So he may have a very quiet game. And then from a boom bust standpoint, I think Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay are the boom bust candidates for this game, only because Melvin Gordon was charged with a DUI this week. It's not that they haven't committed to him playing this week. He has not been suspended yet by the NFL, so we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But Philip Lindsay, if Melvin Gordon is out, Philip Lindsay does have some appeal there. But the Patriots are pretty good on defense, so I understand if you have to play him, I get it. But I just want to limit the upside for those two for this week. And then same thing with Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick had a good game, his last game that he played. So I think if Jerry Jeudy gets shut down, I think Tim Patrick has a chance to have a good game. And then obviously we don't know the stats of Noah Fant right now. We don't know if he's going to be playing this week, so he's a guy that you're going to sit in this game. But I think that the Patriots defense are a great play in this game for fantasy. So I think that with that being the case, let's move on to the Washington versus the Giants. The Washington football team, they've been struggling. They moved on from Haskins. They brought in Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen gets hurt. Alex Smith is now the starter, but it looks like Kyle Allen is going to be back. But this is going to be one of the uglier games of the week. The Giants are favored by 2.5 points. The over/under is 42.5. And then, like I said, at quarterback, you're going to sit Daniel Jones and you're going to sit Kyle Allen. I don't think those are two good fancy options with any upside this week. I think at running back, Antonio Gibson continues to be a guy that you can be more of an RB2 this week. I think Devontae Freeman, he's a low-end RB2, kind of a flex for me this week. Devontae Freeman has, obviously we were trying to see what his workload is going to be like. Looks like he's going to, obviously take the bulk. So I think he is a good flex play just because it looks like he's going to be the workhorse back now. He looks like he's in football shape. Looks like he has more of a piece of that offense. So I think that he's a good play this week. And then at wide receiver, you're going to play Terry McLaurin. I think that's a good play. His upside is going to be a little limited, but I do think that just based on the offense itself, but I think that you have to play him just like anything else. He's one of your guys that you can't bench Terry McLaurin. Unless you just have a stout wide receiver core, I don't think that you can then sit Terry McLaurin. But I do think that when it comes to the Giants, Darius Slayton, he's more of a flex play, like a wide receiver 3 for me. Golden Tate, he's kind of a boom bust guy for him this week. He's like a wide receiver 4. So with that being the case, there's some options here if you need them. At tight end, obviously Evan Ingram is a guy that you're going to play without hesitation, because you want to, like I said, tight end is such a thin part of fantasy right now that he's getting the targets. So you want to chase the targets and you want to try to hopefully get a touchdown out of them. But I think another flex play for this week for this running back, for the running back position for the Washington football team is J.D. McKissick. So obviously Antonio Gibson's there; he's getting the majority of the work, but McKissick is getting a lot of the receptions. So I think that if you definitely need the help, I think J.D. McKissick is a good option there in this game. And when it comes to the Ravens versus the Eagles, the Ravens are favored in this game by 7.5 points. The over/under is 48. And obviously you're going to start at quarterback. You're starting Lamar Jackson. I'm not playing Carson Wentz in this game. I think, that team is just struggling too much because we don't know the stats of Deshaun Jackson or Alshon Jeffrey. So with that being the case, I think Carson Wentz is he's a sit this week. And at running back, obviously Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders needs to be played every week. I think that it showed against a good defense, against the Steelers, that he's able to produce. I think with Miles Sanders, you just have to play him because I don't think you have the luxury of not playing him unless you're able to have Madison or you have James Robinson or someone like that. But Miles Sanders is a guy that you have to play this week. And then for the Ravens, Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins continue to be that flex play for me because I don't understand who's going to get the most of the carries. It's just a crapshoot to understand like if Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins are going to get the carries or Gus Edwards because they're all implementing the offense, and I just don't want to have you guys start somebody that may have limited upside, but they're more of a flex play for me. At wide receiver, Marquise Brown, you're playing him. I think that he's the number one wide receiver for the Ravens, so I think you have to play him. And then, I know Travis Fulgham was the hot waiver wire pickup this week. I think you can play him if you need that help, but I don't think that he's gonna have a big game. I think that it's gonna be one of those games where he's had 2 good games so far, but I think Fulgham could have his upside limited based on that Ravens defense. And then at tight end, you're playing Zach Ertz and Mark Andrews. I know Zach Ertz has not been playing well, but I think that he's a guy that he's Carson Wentz's top target. So I think that you have to play him, and hopefully it turns around for him. But it's one of those things. It's hard to sit someone like Zach Ertz, and then like I said, you're going to start Mark Andrews, and then moving on to the Browns versus the Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are favored by 3.5 points. The over-under is 51. Now in this game, you're going to start Big Ben. Big Ben is having a great season so far, and the Browns defense is a tough defense, but I think that Big Ben is a good start for this week. You're going to bench Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, obviously he was a tale of 2 games in 2 halves last week. He was a guy who was just showing up in the first half of that. He was just shredding the Colts defense, and then second half, that's where a lot of his mistakes came through. So I think with the Steelers defense, they can put pressure on the quarterback, but I think Baker Mayfield, he's a sit for me this week. At the running back position, you're gonna same thing. You're gonna start Kareem Hunt. We saw what Miles Sanders did against the Steelers rush defense. He had a good game, so I think Kareem Hunt can have a good game. You're gonna play James Conner in this game, and when it comes to at the wide receiver position, now OBJ, he got sent home yesterday because of an illness. We don't know what if that was COVID related or just a regular cold or the flu, but just check his stats because he could be out. But we still got some time to see what happens. So OBJ, he can be a start this week. At wide receiver, I think Juju, he's a start. He's a wide receiver too. He definitely has not given the fantasy owners what they had hoped for when drafting Juju, but it's the emergence of Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool that's kind of really capped his upside. But I do think that Juju is a play this week. Obviously based on your options, and then for a flex option for a wide receiver, I think Chase Claypool, he does have that appeal. So is Jarvis Landry. But with Claypool, I think it hinders on the status of Deontay Johnson. If Deontay Johnson is going to play this week, I think that you're going to see a very quiet game. You're not going to get 4 touchdowns from Chase Claypool. That's just an anomaly. That doesn't happen all the time. So I think that he can still have a decent fantasy production game, but you're probably going to see more in the 10 to 15 point range rather than the 42 point range that he was last week. And then, like I said, your boom bust candidates in this game are Deontay Johnson and Austin Hooper. I think that Deontay Johnson, like I said, if he plays, I think he's a good play, but it's high risk, high reward because does he re-aggravate his back? Does he get injured again? So do you want to put him in your lineup and see what he does, or you want him on your bench just in case he's not healthy, so you save some of your points for the week? But at tight end, I think Eric Ebron, he's a good play. I think the Browns struggle with the tight end, and I think that Ebron, he's averaging like 6 targets a game. So I think that because he's implementing the offense a little bit more each game now, I think that Eric Ebron is a safe play. And then going on to the Bears versus the Panthers, the Bears, they've been struggling a little bit on offense, but what's helping them is their defense. They play the Panthers, and the Panthers are favored by 1.5 points. The over-under is 44.5. At quarterback, you can't really you can't play Teddy Bridgewater and you can't play Nick Foles. Even though the Bears defense, they're not the Bears defense of a few years ago, but they're very good against the pass. Like I said, Mike Evans was the first touchdown pass they had given up all season. So I think the upside's a little limited with the Panthers as a whole in the sense of Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Teddy Bridgewater. I still think that Mike Davis has a good game in this. I think he's the startable player that's on this game is Mike Davis, at running back. And then David Montgomery, he has the workload. With Cohen out, Montgomery's getting the option. He's number one option there. So David Montgomery is a good play there. At wide receiver, you're going to obviously you have to play Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's leading the league in targets, so I don't think that's going to change at all. So I think Allen Robinson's a good play. And then you're playing DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, because if you don't have the luxury, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, they're having good seasons. So I would say in a sense like Robbie Anderson's having the better season than DJ Moore, but these are number one options for these teams. So I think that the targets are both there for DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. So you still have to play him, even though the upside is capped. I still think that they're options for this week. And then with the Bears, Anthony Miller, I don't want to play him. I understand, and Darnell Mooney, these are two guys that are kind of sharing the load right now as a slot receiver. We don't know who's going to get the targets, who's going to get the touchdown. So as of right now, I'm not playing them in any league that I have them in. They're usually, right now, they're on the free agent. They're in the free agent pool. So nobody's playing them in my league. But I figured these are options if you're really searching for someone to just kind of plug in, hopefully for a touchdown or whatnot. And then at tight end, you're going to play Jimmy Graham. I think Jimmy Graham, he's not the Jimmy Graham of old, but he is getting the touchdowns, and Nick Foles likes throwing to the tight end, so I think he does have some appeal this week. And then going on to the Lions versus the Jags. Now, this game, the Detroit Lions are favored by 3 points, and the over-under is 54.5. At the quarterback position, I think Matthew Stafford, he's a fine play this week. And when it comes to Gardner Minshew, I think with him, I think he's more of a kind of a boom bust. He's a streamer this week, so I think that if you are dealing with Joe Burrow, you're dealing with Matt Ryan, and any of those leggings, I think Minshew definitely is a decent play for this week. But I think that it's like I said, the Jags offense struggled a little bit last week, and I think they do turn around against the Lions. It's a plus matchup for them. But at running back, you're going to play James Robinson. This is a good matchup. Hopefully he kind of reignites what we were hoping for. He was going to be last week against the Texans. I hope he makes it happen this week against the Lions, but he's a startable piece. But when it comes to the Lions backfield, I think Adrian Peterson and both DeAndre Swift are both flex options this week. I think that, DeAndre Swift finally had his first rushing touchdown. I think that they start implementing him more. I think this is what we're looking for, is seeing how he was being used before the bye week, and hopefully now that the bye week has passed, that he's going to be able to be that guy this week going forward for the Lions. But, Peterson's he's still going to get his touches, but I think that maybe they go ahead and transition to DeAndre Swift as their running back. At wide receiver, you're playing Kenny Golladay. He has the best matchup this week against the corner. So with that, he has a very, very plus matchup. So I think Kenny Golladay has a big game this week. And I think at wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right now, DJ Chark, he hasn't been playing. He's very limited at practice this week. So if that's the case, Laviska Shenault Jr. becomes a good play this week. And I think Keelan Cole, if DJ Chark is out, I think Keelan Cole becomes a good boom-bust candidate this week because of what could happen with DJ Chark. And then for the Lions, I think Marvin Jones is that boom-bust as well. I'm on the Marvin Jones, bandwagon. I think that he has the potential to give you good fancy numbers, but this season it has not come to fruition right now. But I do think that he definitely can have those good games, and this is a plus matchup. So I think that Marvin Jones could be that high-risk, high-reward player for this game. And then at tight end, you're going to play T.J. Hawkinson in this game. He's a top 10 tight end for me this week, and I think that he could have a decent game as well. But it's one of those games where it could be a good game, or it's going to be one of those games where you're frustrated because nothing's happening offensively. But I think that with these guys that are mentioned are going to have decent fancy outings. And they're going to the Jets versus the Dolphins. Miami's favored by 9.5 points, and the over/under is 47. I mean, the Jets, I don't know what to say about the Jets. The Jets are just in disarray right now. But I think that when it comes to fantasy, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a top 12 quarterback this week. I think that he's a great streamer. He's been playing great all season. He had one bad game, but as of right now, Ryan Fitzpatrick he's showing up, and it's exciting to watch. So I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a start this week. Obviously, you're not playing Joe Flacco. At running back, Myles Gaskin is a good play. I think that Devontae Parker is a good play at the wide receiver position. I think Jameson Crowder is a good start. I think Mike Gesicki is a good start at tight end. And when it comes to the Jets backfield with LeVeon Bell not there, I mean, Frank Gore is the guy right now. And I think LaMichael Pirine, he's a guy that, he's the rookie that they drafted. He potentially could have a good game, but these are not guys I want to start. I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to have an aneurysm trying to watch this game if I played Frank Gore or LaMichael Pirine. But those are the two running backs right now for the Jets. And then Preston Williams. Preston Williams, he had a good game for the Dolphins last week. I don't want to put my lamp right now. I want to see if it's consistent. Did he turn the corner from his ACL reconstruction? Is he able to now play with confidence? So if Preston Williams has another good game, then I think he's a guy that you could consider put it like in your flex or as a wide receiver 3. But right now I'm going to wait and see if that was was that a fluke game, or is that going to be a consistent thing we're going to see week in and week out. And then going on to the Packers versus the Bucks. The Packers are favored by 1 point in this game. The over-under is 55. You're going to start Aaron Rodgers. You're starting Tom Brady in this game. At running back, you're starting Aaron Jones, Ronald Jones. And then at wide receiver, you're going to start Mike Evans. And Devontae Adams is back, so you're starting him. And I think at tight end, I think Robert Tonyan, let's see what he has. I mean, right, you can do worse at tight end. I think that even though with Devontae Adams coming back, he's going to get majority of the targets. They don't have that number 2 wide receiver yet right now. With Alan Lazard out, Marquez Valdes-Scantling has not shown up. So I think Robert Tonyan is the third option behind Aaron Jones. So I do think that if you have him, I think you can start him and see what happens. When it comes to the boom bust candidates for this game, I think Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, he's the clear starter. Fournette is still coming back from an ankle injury. Who knows how his usage is going to be, but I think he's more of a boom bust this week. I think Chris Godwin, I put Chris Godwin here because we don't know if he's actually going to be active. He's practicing at a limited basis this week, but we don't know if he's going to play. And it's a little concerning that it's taken this long for him to recover. So if he is active, do you feel confident playing Chris Godwin? Because we don't know if he's going to be on a limited snap count. We don't know if he's even going to, if he's going to even play. So I think Chris Godwin's just another player you have to monitor his status for the week. And I do I do a YouTube video every Saturday on the injury updates, and if I think the player is going to be in or out based on the information I get on Saturday, because usually Saturday most teams declare if a player is in or out, so I do that video on YouTube on Saturdays. And as of right now, I mean, there's nothing that shows that he's going to play, but that could change, and he could have a full participation today in practice, and then that stuff changes. But I think that Chris Godwin is just one of those guys that you just have to have low expectations if he's going to start this week. But he could have because a couple weeks ago, DJ Chark was a guy that I had said, I don't want to play him because I'm afraid that he may not play a full game. He comes out and scores almost 30 PPR points. So that's a risk you take when you play a guy who's coming off injury. And then going to the Sunday night football game, we have the Rams versus the 49ers. The Rams are favored by 3 points. The over-under is 51.5. Now at quarterback, I think Jimmy G, you're going to sit. He had an awful game. He doesn't look healthy. I think that Jimmy G is not a startable piece this week. I think Jared Goff does have he's kind of that boom bust type of quarterback this week. You saw what Ryan Fitzpatrick did against the 49ers defense. Now, I think the Rams offense is a lot better than the Dolphins offense. So does Jared Goff have that good game, or does he have just a complete dud? So Jared Goff, for me, this is a division opponent. Usually division opponents are a lot harder to deal with just because they know the team so much, just because they play them so much. So I think that Jared Goff could have a boom bust type of game, especially if you're thin at quarterback. He may be a guy that you could play. But the running back position, I'm back on Raheem Mostert. Like, he's going to be the starter. You have to play him. He had a good game last week. He had 90 yards. It's just that 49ers offense was completely just had a bad game last week. So I think Raheem Mostert is the guy you must start in this game. And I think for me, Darrell Henderson, he's a low RB2 for me this week. You start him. Like I said, it's hard to deal with this backfield because it's just like the Ravens backfield. We don't know who's going to get the carries. I mean, Henderson got the fantasy points last week. He got the touchdowns, but then Malcolm Brown still had 11 carries. And then you had Cam Akers who had 6 carries. So, Obviously, they're implementing every single running back. It doesn't matter who gets the touchdowns. It's Russian roulette to figure out which one that's going to be. But I think as of right now, Darrell Henderson is the more consistent running back. So I think he's an RB2. And I think at wide receiver, you're going to play Cooper Kupp. You're playing Robert Woods. And then on the 49ers side of the ball, I think Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, they're more of a boom bust for me. But I do think that they're playable. It's just a matter of who's playing quarterback for the 49ers and how's this game streak going to go. But at tight end, I think you're going to, obviously Kittle's going to be the guy that you're going to play with confidence. Tyler Higbee's a little more questionable. I think he's still startable. But Joe Everett has been implemented more in the offense. So is this a timeshare between the two? But I think Higbee, if I had to play a tight end as of right now on this team, Higbee's the guy I'm going to go with. And that at the flex, I'm going to play Cam Akers. I think obviously we all had drafted Cam Akers as that rookie running back with a lot of upside. He has not overtaken the backfield yet, but he definitely does have some flex appeal based on the usage because he is the rookie. They want him to play. So I do think that Cam Akers does have some flex appeal. And then moving on to Monday night. So I did not realize this in the recording last week when this happened, but the Chiefs and Bills game got moved because they were supposed to play last night on Thursday night. Because the Bills played on Tuesday night, I thought the game had gotten pushed back until Sunday. However, it's been moved to Monday, so they are playing at 5 o'clock on Monday. So the Bills versus Chiefs have their matchup, and the over/under is 5 points. The Chiefs are favored by 5 points. They have a 57.5 over/under this week. So this is supposed to be one of the bigger matchups this week. But obviously, you're starting Patrick Mahomes and you're starting Josh Allen. And I hope before the game for these two, because Josh Allen had challenged Patrick Mahomes to a throwing contest on who can throw the ball further. And I hope before the game they actually do this, because I actually want to see who has the stronger arm between the two. My money's on Patrick Mahomes, but I think Josh Allen will not be a bad competitor. I think that he will come close, but it'll be cool to kind of see that if that actually happens, but it probably won't because you don't want to throw out your quarterback's arm before the game. But it would be fun to watch. But those two are must starts. Like I said, the running back position, you're playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is probably the last game you get a full workload out of him, so I think that you have to play him, obviously. And you're gonna play Devin Singletary. I think Devin Singletary, because of Zach Moss's injury status, I think Devin Singletary he's a start for me this week. And then at wide receiver, you're obviously playing Tyreek Hill. You're playing Stephon Diggs. Those are the must starts in this game. I think that John Brown and Mecole Hardman have more of a flex appeal for me this week. I do think that with Watkins being out with bad hamstring, I think Hardman has a chance to have a good game. He's just one of those guys where he's being implemented to the offense a lot more, where I feel more confident to play him more as a flex. And then John Brown has been dealing with a calf injury, so I do think that if he does play, he does have a decent flex appeal this week. And then Cole Beasley is that boom bust guy for me on this roster. Gabriel Davis has taken a lot of the snaps, which leaves Cole Beasley with lesser targets, lesser snaps. So Cole Beasley in a PPR format, I think he's a low-end flex, but I do think there's some appeal there still for Cole Beasley because he has not been overtaken by Gabriel Davis yet. It just, you see the snaps being 56 snaps. I think Gabriel Davis is getting 54% of snaps, and then Cole Beasley is getting 54% of the snaps. So they're almost identical. So I think that as of right now, Cole Beasley is more the guy I lean towards, but he could be overtaken at some point. And then at tight end, the only tight end in this game you're playing is Kelsey. Travis Kelsey he's the number one tight end so far this year. He continues to have a great season. So start Kelsey with confidence. And then when it comes to the Monday night game, so we have the Cardinals versus the Cowboys on Monday night. We have the Cowboys. It's over under 55. Obviously the Cowboys are dealing with the loss of Dak Prescott and then bringing in Andy Dalton. And when it comes to fantasy standpoint, I think that obviously at the quarterback position you're playing Kyler Murray. For Andy Dalton, I think Andy Dalton's a boom bust because I do think that if you're a Dak Prescott owner and you were in a 2 quarterback league, Andy Dalton's probably the guy that you went after hard, right? So Andy Dalton has appeal there because he has the weapons. I think that here's a crazy stat that I saw. I was watching Colin Cowherd yesterday morning, and He's a guy who goes against the grain all the time. He's a guy who tries to find stats that matter to production and all that stuff. So he came out with, he said this yesterday, that in the first 4 seasons with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott was 40-24. His win-loss record is 40-24 with 97 passing touchdowns. In Andy Dalton's first 4 seasons in the NFL, he was 40-23-1. So he almost identical records, and Andy Dalton had 99 passing touchdowns. So the point he was making is that is the drop-off so significant to the Cowboys where they cannot be a playoff team, and if Andy Dalton cannot make them a playoff team. I know that these are numbers. We're talking about 2 guys that were in their prime early on in their career. Well, Andy Dalton's not that same guy. Andy Dalton is not 4 seasons in. He's a vet. He's a guy he's a backup now. So I understand what Colin Cowherd was trying to say in the exact of like why it matters because of production. But obviously when it comes to fantasy and what Dak Prescott brings to the offense is the running ability, QB draws. They have to account for him and run, run options, all that stuff. So I think that I get the point, but I do think that because Andy Dalton's not as mobile, it changes the Cowboys offense completely. So I do think that Dalton's a good distributor of the ball. It's just obviously not anywhere close to what Dak Prescott was in this offense. But with that being the case, I still think that Andy Dalton is a decent play this week just because of the matchup and plus, with the weapons that he has. But, like I said, Kyler Murray, he's a must start at running back. I think Zeke becomes more of the workhorse back because of Andy Dalton. I think Zeke gets a better workload. And then Kenyon Drake, Kenyon Drake's on that verge of not being startable right now. He's a low-end RB2 for me this week. I do think that it's just unfortunate what's going on with Kenyon Drake, but he's a guy that he's a guy you have to play because he's a starting running back that is on the brink of losing his job to Chase Edmonds, it looks like. But at wide receiver, you're playing DeAndre Hopkins, you're playing Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb is a must start. At tight end, I think you can play Dalton Schultz in this game. I think that there's some appeal there, but I don't know how Andy Dalton's going to distribute the ball. So that might be a guy that you could hope for a good game. But it looked like he wasn't playing healthy last week anyway, so I think Dalton Schultz does have a decent outing this week. But like I said, we don't know exactly how that's going to play out with Andy Dalton. And at the flex, I think Chase Edmonds is a good flex. He's now taking a bigger role in the offense, and he had a better fantasy outing than Drake last week. So I think Chet Edmonds now is a consideration in that every week flex until he takes over the job from Drake, it looks like. And then Michael Gallup, I think Michael Gallup is a decent flex this week because when Andy Dalton came in the game on Sunday, he distributed the ball 3 times to Cooper, 3 times to CeeDee Lamb, and 3 times to Michael Gallup. And when the game was on the line, he went to Michael Gallup. So I think Michael Gallup does have some appeal here. And I think that, a wide receiver that's a kind of a boom bust for me is Christian Kirk. He's the number 2 receiver for the Cardinals. So I do think that, obviously DeAndre Hopkins gets all the targets, but I do think that Christian Kirk does have some appeal here as a boom bust. But, that's based on just volume. And when it comes to defensive streamers this week, I think the Dolphins they're a must start. I think that when they play the Jets have only one fantasy option in Jameson Crowder, so I think that the Dolphins are a must start this week when it comes to defenses. And then Washington's a good play against the Giants, and the funny thing is the Giants are a good play against Washington. So those are the teams that you're going to stream on defense. And our bye weeks this week, we have the Raiders, Saints, Chargers, and Seahawks, so a lot of big names on bye weeks this week. But if you have any questions about your starts and sits or any fantasy football advice at all, you can leave a comment below, or you can email me at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com, and I'll try to answer all the questions I can. And then don't forget that I'll be doing my injury updates for week 6 on YouTube on tomorrow. So don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss that. And then with that being the case, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us over on Twitter and Facebook at the Gridiron Pod. I'm on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day and good luck in week 6.